Hi, it's Glynis Nunn here, Olympic gold medalist, mum, coach. You're here listening to the Physical Performance Podcast.
And the winner is...
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Welcome back, or welcome to the Physical Performance Show, brought to you by the Gold Coast Marathon and Pogo Physio. I'm Brad Beer, sports physiotherapist by trade and training, and founder of Pogo Physio. The aim of this show is to educate and inspire you towards the pursuit of your own physical best performance. We do this through interviews featuring some of the world's top physical performers and also some of the world's preeminent experts in their chosen fields. Each week, we'll bring you the highs, the lows, and the learnings of the featured guests across a range of episodes, including interest editions, expert editions, coaches' corners, and featured performer editions. And on today's episode 169, I bring you a conversation that I recently had with Australian sporting legend, 1984 Olympic heptathlon champion, none other than Glynis Nunn. By way of bio, Glynis Nunn's long and distinguished sporting career spans more than 30 years as an athlete, coach, and administrator. After Glynis's dual heptathlon gold medals at the 1982 Brisbane Commonwealth Games, followed by the 84 Los Angeles Olympic Games, Glynis was granted the Medal of the Order of Australia. Glynis is a qualified secondary physical education and English teacher and a level 5 track and field coach. Glynis has trained athletes for the World Youth and Junior Games, the Commonwealth Games, World Championships, and the Olympic Games. She currently serves as the director of the Gold Coast Academy of Sport and also as the executive director for the Australian Track and Field Coaches Association. Glynis really is a remarkable lady, and I know you're going to take so much from her sharings on this episode. We cover so much, including the development of junior athletes, what matters, what doesn't, mindset, overcoming challenges. We debunk some myths around junior strength and conditioning, and Glynis issues her physical challenge for the week. So let's jump in on this featured performer episode with Olympic champion and director of the Gold Coast Academy of Sport, Glynis Nunn. I have been looking forward to this, sitting down with you, Glynis, for months. I'm sitting here looking at a newspaper article that I've kept. It was from 2016. So it's taken us a few years to organise. But Glynis Nunn, Olympic champion, OAM, Executive Director of the Gold Coast Academy of Sport, and also the Executive Director of the Track and Field Coaches Association. Welcome to the Physical Performance Show.
Thanks, Brad.
Glynis, where do we start? You've had a long, illustrious career in sport as an athlete, the highest of highs, Olympic champion, an administrator now, coach as well through all this. There's so much to glean from you that fits with the very heartbeat of this show, which is helping people to inspire them and equip them to perform at their best, whatever the endeavour. But before we go into the learnings, the teachings, those highs and lows, let's get a little bit of context to your world, particularly where it started for you. I believe you were raised in Toowoomba in a property in the bush, and you had some fairly humble beginnings in the athletics world.
Yeah, you've done a bit of research. Yeah, originally, until I was 9, we lived in the city of Toowoomba. So I lived down below a park called Gold Park, and that was where I actually started running. So I used to see these kids sliding down a hill on bits of cardboard, and then they'd run back up the hill and they'd slide back down and run back up. And I was a bit of a tomboy, and I thought, oh, that looks fun. So I went and joined them with the fun, and then ultimately joined the club, so Garden City Athletic Club, and then ultimately, just kept on running. And when I was 10, my dad, he was brought up out at Charleville, Cunnamulla, on a sheep property, and so he always had a love for the country and farms. So Mum and Dad bought a farm down at Hodson Vale, which was outside of Toowoomba, a big farm, and so we moved down there on my 10th birthday. And so basically, for 3 years that was my life, just living on the farm and running around and jumping on a horse or jumping on a cow, riding it out of the bales, or climbing trees and carrying stuff, all that sort of stuff. Even the club that I then moved to, which was Toowoomba Women's, they used to come down in cross-country time, and we had a cross-country course around the farm. So it was just look, I can't, stress enough what a great upbringing I had, farm life and that sort of stuff to do out in the country. It was just a blessing in disguise.
So where did your world then collide, this country kid having fun, outdoors, running around, with the athletic pursuits that you then embarked on to the highest of highs?
Look, I suppose as a kid you always watch TV, and the Olympics was a big part of my life because I just loved sport. So I used to watch the Olympics every time it was on. And so, when I was 10, I made the bold statements that there was, things that I wanted to do. Two of my main aims was, one, to be a phys ed teacher, because my sister was a couple of years older than me, so she was at high school when I was still at primary school, and her phys ed teacher was my first coach. So he was my high jump coach, John Goulson. And so John then got me into the sport, really. And I'm a phys ed teacher because John's a phys ed teacher. That was always who I wanted to be like. He was just, my idol. And the other thing that I wanted to do was, after watching the Olympics on TV, was to, represent my country and wear the green and gold. And it was funny, some people said, oh, that's pie in the sky stuff. And but there was other people that went, yep, she's going to do that. So it was, I don't know, I think you can have a strong will and you can be stubborn and all those things, but, and I was lucky enough to have parents that supported me with everything that I wanted to do. So I was lucky.
I mean, so much there. I mean, so many children have dreams, and in the athletics world, Olympics is typically seen as the pinnacle of so many sports. So you were a young girl with that dream, not different to many girls, right, growing up. You mentioned the influence of John Goulson, the phys ed teacher, and that at that stage you sort of idolised him. He was someone that you wanted to emulate, and obviously you did. Plus some, you became a qualified teacher, and then also your athletic success. What was it about John at that stage that was so inspirational to you?
I don't know. He was just engaging. He wanted me to learn so much. He wanted me to participate not only in high jump but in all events, and introduced me to so many things. I know I was still in primary school, and they had a meet at Harristown High. This goes many, many years back, and I wasn't part of Harristown High, but he still got me to compete for Harristown because they were short some competitors, and so I was competing for Harristown in all these different events at this inter-school carnival. But it was an invitation thing. I just loved it, and to this day, John and I are still friends, and I used to babysit when he had kids, and it was just been that really strong relationship that you just love through coaching, and I think that's just sport.
And at what point, Glynis, did you realise that you had the interest, you had a mentor, someone that was engaging, encouraging in your world, you had the support of your family, but at what point did you realise that you actually had a special talent and gift?
I don't know. I suppose when I was 13, I was picked in my first state team. That was cross country, and so I went away to Melbourne. I finished midfield in the cross country. I then came back and went into hospital and had my appendix out because I'd had pain the whole time I was away. And after that, it was like I went to a new coach that was Ian McQuillan, and again we used to call him Mr. Mac, and that was Toowoomba, and he taught me things in all of the events, and I had such a blessed start with my career with both John and Mr. Mack. They taught me the right way to do things, and I think that held me in such a good place that I had good habits. And it means a lot if you, as an athlete, if you start off with good habits and you haven't got those bad habits to finish with. So when I was 14, 15, I started doing every event. Started winning state championships, setting state records, and then going on at 14, I competed in the under 18 championships and in nationals, and actually got medals. So, I think then people sort of went, yeah, I think she's got something. And I loved it. And, part of doing everything meant that you didn't have to warm up for different events. I just kept warm and going from one event to the other. So it was easy.
So you started to have some success at a national junior level.
Yeah.
And, you'd had the earlier state championships and records happening. You were a kid from the country. Did you ever feel a little bit out of your... a bit intimidated by some of the city kids? I mean, that dynamic, I think, has in some ways been reduced over the years with, kids in sport, but I think it still exists. Did you ever feel a little bit like, I'm just a kid from the country?
I think, but you can have that as a plus. I think that was really good because I was showing people that you could do something. Like we caught a bus to school. It took me an hour on the bus to get to school. And then Mr. Mack would pick me up from school and he'd take me to training. And then Dad would pick me up after training and take me home because Dad was a builder. And so then, we'd drive home. And that was a few times a week. And, I was lucky that I had those people to support me, to pick me up and take me and do all that sort of stuff, that they could see that I had that talent and wanted it to grow. So I used to, it was just a challenge. It was always me against everyone else. I remember when I was 10, this girl, Carolyn Martin, she always used to beat me at school. And we ran a race at Lang Park, and that was where the championships were, a grass track. It was a beautiful grass track. So Lang Park, we ran the race and she won and I got second. And then after the race there was a protest, and so we had to run it again, and I'd just gone up and I think I'd had something to eat and a drink, and so we had to go back down and run the race again. I won the race, and it was the first time I beat her, and she actually gave up and I went on. So you just sort of think, what could she have done if she'd continued? I mean, she was bigger than me and obviously talented, but I just loved it. It was in the blood. It's still in the blood. So, that's why I'm still involved with it now. So it goes across many years.
Such a wonderful thing. And I mean, who were the athletes still in these formative years that you admired and aspired to be like? So obviously you mentioned the influence of your two coaches, Mr. Mack and John. Who were the athletes you were admiring? Were you looking at track and field athletes, or were you enamoured with, I believe, Arthur Ashe? There was Arthur Ashe in there somewhere.
Yeah, so Arthur Ashe, I used to always watch tennis on TV, so Arthur Ashe was one of my idols. I used to love the way he'd play, and no matter whether he won or lost, he was just such a great sportsman. Go up and shake hands, and he used to, when he was interviewed, say all the nicest things, and that was good. One person that I can remember when I got selected in the state secondary Queensland team, Denise Robinson, who then is Denise Boyd, so sprinter. Denise was a phys ed teacher, so I remember, because we went into camp for a week before we went down to Sydney for the Australian School Championships. Denise picked me up from the bus station. Caught the bus from Toowoomba down to Brisbane. I was so excited that she was going to pick me up at the bus station, and she was only new to teaching as well. So it was I was one of the youngest in the team, and I remember I went down to Sydney and I think I won the long jump and the hurdles, and I was this kid that came out of nowhere, and now when I look back and Denise and I are really good friends, we catch up with her and her husband and their children, and it's I look back and I have to laugh, and those relationships and everyone. I have people that were wonderful, inspiration. Not necessarily people that I looked up, but they were just really good, encouraging me and continuing to, get behind me and tell me that I was doing the right thing.
So there's two things that jump out, the engagement you mentioned and the encouragement. I think they're really rocket fuel for anyone's aspirations in life.
Oh, absolutely. You just got a little bit of recognition goes such a long way, because, that's anything that anyone's after, is just a little bit of recognition and encouragement and saying, continue on, you're going to do something. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be winning when you're young, because no one remembers a champion when they're 10 or 12 or 15 or even 18. You have to be in your 20s, your early 20s, and showing that you've got the determination and the commitment to continue with what you're doing. And I keep on saying a defining year with kids is the year that they finish school. So the year that they finish school, they either give up sport or they continue it. And it's if you can keep them engaged and continuing in their sport, that hopefully they'll go on and do something. And it's making sure that you don't burn them out early as well. So as a coach, that's one of my main mantras is, making sure that you don't burn them out and you keep encouraging them and keeping them engaged and doing different things with them. And, that's the way I was brought up. And you just got to make sure that they don't do too much too soon, because if they do these great big training sessions early, then they've got nowhere to go. So if they're doing that sort of training when they're 15 and 16, where do they go when they're 18 and 19 and 20? Because they've done it all. So you've got to make sure that there's room to move in their training regime.
Gosh, it makes me think, Glynis, of Nick Willis, New Zealand's athletic champion, who actually said very similar things. He credits his coach with so much of his longevity and ongoing success, which continues to this day. Maybe his fifth Olympics in Tokyo, and around his coach always strategically held him back, because he wanted Nick to year on continue to improve rather than hit a plateau and regress and get frustrated. I think there's a discipline in that.
Look, there is, and I think you have to not get carried away as a coach, and I think as a parent too, you've got to not get carried away, because every parent wants their kids to be successful, but you've got to, as a coach and as a fellow parent, you have to try and encourage the parents to understand that it's all about growth, and it's okay to have some success, but it doesn't matter if they're not winning all the time. It's about them enjoying the sport, and it's about them improving on their performance bit by bit. And if they don't improve for 1 year, then that's okay. What you might be doing is just, making sure that the technique is correct, or you're changing part of a technique, or you're building some strength or something like that. Or there might be an injury that you're trying just to bring them back gradually from. So you've just got to make sure that there's just a touching base and keeping them encouraged and recognising what they're doing and just listening to them. And I think that's really important. And I had all that, I had John, I had Mr. Mack, then I had another coach in Brisbane, Les Hudson. Les was the first, he taught me how to do the hitch kick in the long jump, for example. And he was Erica Nixon's coach. So Erica was the multi-event female in Australia that I was trying to emulate. So I was following in her footsteps. So Erica is the mum of Olympic Steve Hooker. So there's, there was all these relationships that I've now seen grow. And, so, Steve's mum was Erica, and his dad was quite an established athlete as well. So, it does run in the family.
How do you process, and I want to jump back to one more thing on your formative years before we move off that completely, but just before that, how do you process, Glynis, in your role as a coach and sports administrator now, when that transition year happens that you mentioned, the finishing school, and you see talent drain away from a sport, and with that the potential that existed there, because it's not always about Olympic gold, it's about maximising your potential, to discover that. That's the thrill of the chase. How do you process that? Does it still upset you that potential's maybe never going to be realised?
Yeah, it does. But ultimately, all you can do, or you can be to someone is someone, hopefully, as a role model, as a mentor, someone that they can come and talk to. It's just a matter of being there, I think, in those years and making sure you can keep touching base with them and answering any questions that they've got. But ultimately, it's their decision. You can't make, I have athletes come to me and say, I've got this and this and this and this. And I say, yeah. So what you want me to do? It's your decision.
Your life.
I said, you can talk to me about it, but I'm not going to make the decision for you. It's your decision. So it's their life, it's their commitment, it's their dedication, it's their choices. A lot of people talk about sacrifice. I hate that word. It's never a sacrifice. It's always a choice. You make life choices. I made the choice to go to multi-events. I made the choice to move from Queensland to South Australia. I made the choice of my coaches. I made the choice to give up teaching so that I could commit my time to training. I made the choice to not have an income and to doing it really hard because I wanted to see what I could achieve. It was all my choices. No one made me do it, and it wasn't a sacrifice because it was something I wanted to do. So that way it's got to be a choice. So, it's all those little things, and it comes back to the kids in those definitive years. It's got to be their choice. So it can't be something that they do for mum and dad. I had a young kid last week come to training, and she was doing things, she's 13, doing things half-heartedly. Little rugby player granddad came and saw me and wanted her to learn to run better. And I said, sure, bring her down and we'll have a look. And she was doing it half-hearted, and I looked at her and I said, do you want to be here? She went, no. And I said, who wants you to be here? Mum and Dad. And I went, okay, so you're wasting your time, you're wasting my time, you're wasting their time. Decide what you want to do. She came back Monday, different girl, and improved, like her technique improved out of sight just because she'd made the decision that she wanted to be there and actually improve.
And she owned it.
She owned it, yeah.
Some
and I
ownership.
think that's the thing. You have to make them decide what they want to do. So, and it can't be something that they're doing for mum and dad. Or for anyone else, or for their friends, or for their boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever. It's got to be for them.
And that is the fuel then to be able to withstand the rigours of, development and, what I guess that's the switch between a sacrifice and a choice is it's a choice if you've owned that pathway.
Yeah. I mean, it's a sacrifice probably if you make it for mum and dad.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'll do this because you want me to do it. Well, that's not right.
Got it. Glynis, one thing your parents did have you doing is jumping onto Hessian bags full of foam and into homemade sandpits. I think it just paints a beautiful picture of, it's easy to perceive that you need X and Y equipment, to develop skills and success. But in your case, you just needed a sandpit and a bit of foam, right? And Hessian bags. Yeah,
well, that's what we had at school too. Remember, Toowoomba State High, the grandstand there, the middle of the grandstand, there down the steps, there were all these Hessian bags. If we wanted to do high jump, we had to throw the high jump bags out and put the uprights in the bar. That was it. That was our high jump, and if you missed the bags or you slipped down between, that was tough luck. So that was one of my Christmas presents from mum and dad one year was, the Hessian bags, and I filled them with foam. And then Dad dug out the long jump pit for me. And my hurdles too were pieces of dowel with nails in with another piece of dowel across the top. So if it was windy, you could always hurdle one way so that the wind wasn't going to push the dowel off. But, you do, they're the thing. And I looked today at some of the athletes and, we can't train there because we haven't got this or we haven't got that. And I go, really? You're really going to say that? Even when I was training for LA, I used to do shot put outside the South Australian University, so where one of my coaches were. So I'd go to him when he had a spare, and I'd be warmed up and I'd do from the pathway into the car park. So I had no circle. I just had a pathway, a cement pathway that I threw the shot from, and we drew a circle on there, and that was it. You do what you got to do, and I don't get some of the prima donnas around at the moment that can't do this and can't do that, and do what you can with what you got.
You're listening to Olympic champion OAM Glynis Nunn sharing around the highs, the lows, and the learnings of her remarkable career. Support for today's show comes from the Gold Coast Marathon. Just like the Physical Performance Show, the Gold Coast Marathon encourages runners of all ages and abilities to push their boundaries and strive to complete a personal challenge. The Gold Coast Marathon is held annually on the first weekend in July and is a must-do event for any budding athlete, weekend warrior, or family looking for a challenge to complete together. Run for the good times at the Gold Coast Marathon. Visit goldcoastmarathon.com.au. Support for today's show also comes from Pogo Physio. We exist to help you get back to your physical best following injury. We want everyone who walks through the doors of Pogo Physio to complete their rehabilitation, get back to their physical best, and in doing so, cross their physio finish line. In order to get there, we do not want to see you for a single session more than what you need, or a single session less. We just want to help you get back to your physical best. We do this through traditional session-to-session appointments and also through some unique and award-winning services, including our very popular monthly wellness rehabilitation packs, which include hands-on physiotherapy, supervised active rehabilitation, and use of state-of-the-art equipment, including the Alta G anti-gravity treadmill, all from a very low monthly health fund rebatable fee of $195. To find out more about Pogo Physio's services, jump over and schedule your 1-hour initial appointment at pogophysio.com.au. For now, let's jump back, quite literally, with 1984 Olympic Games champion Glynis Nunn sharing on her highs, lows, and learnings from her career. Do what you can with what you've got, and that certainly, catalysed your success. That work ethic, doing what you can with what you had, to the 1984 LA Olympic Games, where you didn't go into that heptathlon as favourite. No. You knocked off Jacqueline Joyner-Kersee, who Sports Illustrated, endorsed as one of the greatest athletes of the 20th century. You didn't go in as favourite. You went in, far from that. And how did it all play out? I mean, it was a remarkable final leg, that 800 metres.
I actually had dreams before I competed. I always used to have a dream before any major competition. Before Brisbane in 82, I dreamt I won, and that came to fruition. Before LA, I had two parts to the dream. One was I dreamt of flowers, and the other part was that I dreamt of running 13:01 in the hurdles. So the next day, flowers came from someone that knew me since I was a kid to wish me good luck. And then the hurdles were the first event, and I was the first Aussie to compete in the track and field team. And so people were coming up and sort of saying, how are you going to go? I'm going to run 13:01. I dreamt it the other night. And you're running into a headwind. Yeah, I know, I'm going to run 13:01. I dreamt it the other night. I've been training well and blah, blah, blah. So came to the last heat. So the heats are seeded. And so we were in the fastest heat, and so ran as I crossed the line. There's a scoreboard in front of you, and up in the top right-hand corner was the winner's time. And I was lucky enough that I won. And as I crossed, I looked up, and there's 13:01 in the corner. And I just looked to the people in the grandstand and just went, look at that. And they just shook their head and laughed. So had a number of people on the way back asking me to dream a dream for them too. So, that was the start. And when you start with a PB, it sets it up pretty well. And, Jackie was under a little bit of a cloud. We didn't know whether she did have an injury or what was happening. So you've just really got, we all go. I seriously can't remember going into a competition where I wasn't carrying an injury. And in LA I had an arm injury, so it wasn't great for my throws. So, you just have to do the best with what you got, and you take advantage of if anyone else has got any issues. So, I went through the first day, then the second day in the long jump, Sabine Everts, who was the German, she's a good long jumper, so we said we put pressure on Jackie, because Jackie's long jump was a bit doubtful. So because she used to foul a lot, and so we both got out some good jumps, and Jackie fouled, and then she fouled again, and so she had one more jump, so she had to get it in. So she didn't do as well as what she had expected. So then went to the javelin, and which I hate, and then to the 800. So I knew what the equation was before I went into the race, and I can remember being in our holding area for the multis, and my coach John Daly sort of was there, and I think he was more nervous than I was. So he was, talking and saying, you got to run this, and there's this much, you got this much time and this much gap, and blah blah blah. And he was making me that nervous. I walked away, and then I came back, and he was still talking, and I'm going, really? It was a big deal. And so I knew on the line, and I'm on the line, and I'm thinking, don't break. The worst thing would be to break in an 800. So I knew what the equation. I knew Sabine was going to run a good 8, so I just had to keep within 2.5 seconds of her, and she crossed the line, and I counted 1 and 2, and I went, yep, got her. Spun around, counted 1 and 2, and then Jackie came across, and I went, I think I've missed it.
Because of the placing all the time?
The time.
Yeah, because it's 2.5 seconds, I think you need, wasn't it? Yeah,
and so after a while, Jackie came up to me and she said, what do you think? And I said, I think you've got it. She said, yes, so do I. I'm going, shit. So, and then, it took some time for the result to come down, and I'd previously competed in Gotsis, which was it's a wonderful competition in Gotsis. It's by invitation, Austrian-Switzerland border, beautiful scenery. I competed against Jane Frederick, who's an American girl. She's as tall as, I think, my shoulder were at the top of her legs. She was built like a brick.
Yeah.
So she gave me a shirt once, and I think I wore it as a dress. So that's Jane. She was commentating for the ABC, and so she called me over to the fence, and she whispered in my ear, "You've got it by 5." From that time, I can remember nothing.
5 points.
5 points.
Yep.
So it was so close.
Wow. And I mean, at that stage, I think were you a mum at that stage?
No,
not at that stage. Yeah,
no.
This is before the children came.
Yeah.
And how did your world change after that?
Well, it didn't change too much, particularly because I had to continue to compete. So I had, after the Hep, it did change because that night I couldn't sleep, and I thought I was dreaming it, and I put the medal beside my bed, so I kept on touching it to make sure it wasn't a dream. I had a day off, then I had qualifying rounds of the long jump and heats of the hurdles, and then the next day I had semi of the hurdles, final of the long jump, and then the next day I had final of the hurdles. So I had 3 more days of competition. So, I couldn't let it get too much. But I think it really changed when I came home. I wasn't me anymore. I was Glynis Nunn public property, and everyone looked at what I was doing, and I was, it was public scrutiny, and I sort of withdrew a little bit because I went through a marriage breakup as well then, and it was tough. The whole scenario was tough, and I don't think I ever fully appreciated what I'd achieved. Seriously. But anyway, that's life.
As in, life just rolled on, and you were commitment after commitment, and you didn't stop to...
It was just everything. It was like the disappointment, was the upheaval of having your life fall apart, because before LA, everything, my relationship, I was happy, and when you have those sorts of things, performance comes. But then, I got home and things fell apart, and for personal reasons are a real nightmare, and I withdrew from stuff, and became a bit of a recluse, and that was tough because everyone was wanting a piece of you, and so it was hard.
And you dealt, I believe, with a bit of criticism and some derogatory stuff that came your way too, I believe.
Oh, look, it's everything. You start wearing a little bit of makeup, and people go, "Oh, now she's got a," and I'm going, really? I've been to a function, and I'm competing after I've come from the function. I'm just little things like that, and that was hard, and I was still me, and I'm still me now. I'm still the same person as I was before I went to LA. even more grounded, I think, than I was, because you have, yeah. I mean, all I want to do now is promote the sport and help kids.
Yep.
And I'm really lucky to be in a position where I can touch a lot of kids and hopefully help them with experiences that I've had, because you can always say, this is what's happened, and blah. You can only advise them. They can take it at face value, or they can throw it out the door. And hopefully, from experience, I never got to learn a lot of the stuff that I'm teaching kids now. And I keep on saying, as for example, strength and conditioning, if I'd been able to do some of the weights programs that I'm setting for my athletes or advising on now, I would have been awesome. I would have been such a different athlete. I keep on saying, I just look and I go, I would have been so much more dynamic and explosive, but I look at my weights program, it was so boring. And so I hated it because it was so boring. But if I'd had what I'd set now, I'd go, oh my God, I want to go to the weights room and I'd want to do this. But yeah.
So some of those, let's go there. So, we've touched on the career high. Just before we go right into the learnings, as you say, promoting the sport, touching kids, empowering kids and people in general. What was the lowest day, Glynis, the darkest day in your athletic career?
I probably think the hardest time was when I was actually commentating for the 1988 Olympics, and I wished I was down on the field, because I'd gone through a period of time where I'd been training to try and make the team for Seoul. The year before, I had a sore ankle, and I trained, went to the doctor. He said, Glenn, you just got arthritis, had the x-rays, blah, blah, blah. You're just going to have to put up with it. I did. I got to the stage where I couldn't walk, went back to a doctor, then went and got a CAT scan. Obviously, CAT scan showed that I'd had a broken navicular. It had been broken for some 6 months, and I was running on it. And what was happening, I'd been going to a chiropractor, and he was manipulating my ankle and pushing the bone back together in the manipulation. As soon as I'd go out and run, there was pain again. So ended up that it turned from a stress fracture into a break. I saw orthopaedic surgeon and gave me 2 options, on crutches, in plaster, or had to have screws and a bone graft. So it was sort of 6 weeks against 3 months, and I went, let's go 6 weeks. And I continued to train. I had a fiberglass cast put on, I swam, I rode a bike, I did whatever I could, and out of 6 weeks, still broken. So I ended up having to go in and get screws and bone grafts. So still have got the screws in, and I haven't had any trouble since then. But I came back to competing like 3-4 weeks earlier than what I had expected, because the process had healed really well. Went to compete. Competed that morning. On the way home, had a car accident where these young guys ran a red light and hit me, and basically after that I had some injuries and couldn't compete. And it's a hard thing when something out of your control is taken away from you. So I'd worked so hard for so many months in so much pain and hospital and operations and whatever, and these young kids in a car acting like lunatics had taken all that time away from me. So, I ultimately then was asked to be on the commentary team, which I did. So that was hard. That was probably the hardest time, and I still question why it all happened.
Gosh, I mean, it is life, isn't it? Those external events that, you can't control. So that, that would have been your second Olympic Games, and you were the defending Olympic champion.
Yeah, but I actually wasn't going in the heptathlon. I was going I was trying to make 400 hurdles.
The hurdles, so you'd focused on that.
Because I'd been training for multis for so many years, and just found that you were getting little niggles and pain and so forth, and so I decided just to do hurdles. And I trained really, really hard, but then it was all taken away.
And in your heart of hearts, I suspect you knew that you would have been competitive amongst the field.
Well, I probably would have been competitive if I'd had that period of time. But, I mean, Deb went on to win the gold medal, and I doubt whether I could have done that. But at least I would have liked to have been given the opportunity to compete in another Olympics, because once you've been to one, they are so special. And, you know, no matter what you do in any sport, I think the Olympics, you can't go above that, because it is the pinnacle of any international performance. You know, the Olympics is the best in the world, particularly in track and field, because every continent in the world, you can run. You know, it's different, you know, with swimming. There's only so many countries that have pools and have programs and so forth. And Australia does really well because, you know, we're surrounded by ocean and people have to learn to swim. You know, it's life and death, whereas running is not life and death. So you run and you know, you have got your canyons and it's all through the world where, so you can actually say that you have been best in the world at one particular time.
Yeah, not many people get to carry the title Olympic champion.
No,
that's for sure.
I'm blessed, and you know, I was really lucky because my son is in America now, and he first went to Illinois, and his soccer coach there actually found out who his mum was, and he went up to Blake once and said, I know who your mum is. And he went, oh, okay. He said, I know Jackie Joyner really well, so when your mum comes over, we'll have to organise dinner. So Jackie lived outside of Illinois. So small world.
And has that happened yet, the dinner?
No.
Not yet. We will. Go and get Blake, eh?
He's moved to Indiana now, so
okay.
Somewhere different.
Well, Jackie, if you're listening in, make this dinner happen. If you missed last week's episode featuring Kim Keatle, physiotherapist, to Romain Grosjean, Team Haas Formula One race car driver, then here's a little snippet of what you missed.
21 races throughout the year, going to Australia, going through Asia, going to South America, North America, and then through Europe. So covering, you know, quite a large portion of the globe. We are limited occasionally by access to gyms, particularly through Europe where the facilities aren't so great. Our training throughout the years always depends on what's available to us, and we'll have to modify slightly depending on where we are. We also then have the issue of jet lag and changing time zones. So for long haul flights, or flights to where we're having significant time zone changes, we'll always adapt our sleeping patterns a few days before.
To tune into the full episode featuring Kim Keatle, download away from wherever it is that you enjoy your podcasts from. And while there, don't forget to peruse the archives dating right back to episode 1 featuring surf lifesaving and Ironman champion Ali Day. For now, let's jump back with this week's featured performer, Olympic champion OAM Glynis Nunn, sharing on her highs, lows, and many career learnings. Glynis, you're so passionate about the work that you do in administration, coaching. Before we pressed record today, we were talking about, one of the topics that, as a physiotherapist, a sports physio, I'm really passionate about, and that's youth development, and in particular, strength and conditioning done appropriately for juniors. You mentioned you never got to learn some of the things that now you teach, and this one of those things being strength and conditioning. So what are the key things, what are the key mistakes that you see juniors making in this regard?
I think there's two, and it's really easy. They either do it too early and they lift too heavy too early and don't learn to lift correctly, or someone's told them that they shouldn't lift until they're 18, or they shouldn't do strength conditioning, and then they've missed it. They've missed the boat. I think you need to learn how to do strength conditioning or weights early, but you learn the technique. It's really important to learn how to lift correctly. And that doesn't mean lift weights heavy. You just need to go through the motions. So it's range of motion and technique. And I was really lucky in my career. After I won in LA, I was then taught how to do Olympic lifts. And I was taught by Dean Lucan's coach. And, I was taught how to do clean and jerk and how to do snatch. And I love the cleans. I think it's such a universal exercise, and it's an all-body exercise. And it's something I think that everyone needs to learn how to do. But that's something that I'm trying to get my athletes to do. When they're 14, 15. Even some of my younger ones, 13, just learning how to do the initial stages of a clean, so shoulder shrugs with a bar or even just a broomstick, just to learn how to do it properly, and just learn to do body weights. So before you start into a gym, you should basically have a general strength program, and that can just be body weight, because there's so many exercises you can do just with your own body weight, and you don't need equipment. You might need maybe a medicine ball, a chair, something like that. You can do a multitude of exercises just with that, and have fun doing it. So that's really important.
So those two mistakes where people the children either start too early and maybe with improper technique, or they leave it until they're 18 plus. And as you said, you miss that window of opportunity. And there's still so many misnomers in junior sport that weights and children don't go together. Yet the IOC have issued a position paper on this, the British Journal of Sports Medicine, a consensus statement that children athletically and for life robustness physically need to be learning how to use their body weight, and then do strength and conditioning work, and even for things like bone mineral density through life skills. It's just absolutely... even
just plyos. There's been literature. There's coaches still saying, "Oh, no, you shouldn't do bounding, you shouldn't do hops." If you do it under a controlled environment, and you're led the right way, and you don't do too many contacts. If you do it correctly, you land flat-footed, so you're not putting all the pressure through the ball of the foot up the shin, so you're not going to create shin splints, all those sorts of things. If you start them off slowly and gradually build on that base, then you can make a really strong, robust body. And I talk about a pillar of strength. The pillar of strength is from the shoulder to the hips, and if you can grow that pillar of strength from a young age, then you've got a pillar of strength for the rest of your life. I went out last week to a school that the academy has a relationship with Upper Coomera, and I sat down with the year 7s, for example, sit-ups. Oh my goodness! And I said to them, "Here I am. I'm a 58-year-old woman, and I'm doing more than what you can do. And I haven't even trained. I haven't done this sort of stuff, but I can still do more because I've had that pillar of strength from a young age." And I think that is so important.
And that, in the world that I professionally work in, rehabilitation, sports medicine, it's really shifted from a lot of injuries being classified as overuse to lack of preparation, because the body just isn't resilient enough. And so these fundamental learnings and teachings from the early years onwards can make the world of difference to seasons that aren't characterised by boom bust with injuries, but seasons in which you can hopefully build year upon year. And
I think more so with boys, and sometimes some of the girls, they go through a growth that they're growing really quickly, and they might start training, but they're doing too much too quickly, and with the growth and with the amount of training, then they get injury after injury after injury. If I look back on my life, brought up on a farm, we used to lug around, I used to climb trees. At school we played hopscotch, we played elastic, so much jumping. And the only sport that we played when I was at school, because it was a 3-teacher school, there was 10 kids in my class, 2 girls and 8 boys. We played tennis. There wasn't a lot of sport that I did within the school because we didn't have the opportunity. We had a phys ed teacher that came around once a month. So we did what we did at school, and we had a tennis court, and the oval was full of bindies, so we didn't go out onto the oval much. So it was what I did on the farm. So I'd jump on the horse and ride from A to B and see how fast I could get there, or run around the paddock, or herd the cows, or stuff like that. I was always out doing. That's not what we're doing with kids now. We drive them to school. We wrap them in cotton wool, in bubble wrap, and we don't let them climb trees. Now at school they don't do gymnastics. They, even now they're not going to be doing high jump. They're not going to be doing hurdles at school. Why? Because they're worried about workplace health and safety. For God's sake, where's this world coming to? We need to get some sort of a phys ed program, again, happening in schools, because the problem that we've got with growth in kids and strength in kids and development, fundamental movement patterns in kids, we're not teaching them in the school.
So,
Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox.
No, this is a good soapbox because it's an important one. And so if you could do one thing, Glynis, in your knowledge, your influence that you have in the world of sports and junior development, what would, in a school curricula, what would it be? One thing.
Phys ed. Get phys eds into every primary school and actually don't let the classroom teacher, because they're not equipped to do this sort of stuff. A phys ed is trained. And even then I question now because, tertiary education has changed. Teaching, they're not having as much contact time. They're not covering the amount of sports that we used to do when we went through. I can remember at Teachers College, we went to college and we had contact hours from 8 in the morning until 5 and 6 in the afternoon. And that's every day. Now, they're lucky if they go twice a week because they can do stuff online. You don't learn online. You can learn, and everything that's online is not necessarily correct. If you look at some of the things on YouTube and whatever, and parents go, you should be doing this, or, you look up a program and you should be doing, that's not necessarily the right thing. So, every program, every technique is individual. So even though you've got this one technique that you might have that's the ideal technique, that's, this middle, every athlete comes off that major technique because we all have little idiosyncrasies that is related to that particular person. So while you might have an ideal technique, so it's going to make you run fast, it's not a Michael Johnson. Who would tell someone to run? I wouldn't tell anyone to run like Michael Johnson because he used to run short, he used to lean back. It was terrible. But it worked for him. And his coach used to say, everyone else is doing it wrong, Michael's doing it right. Michael was doing it right for Michael. And, it's the same right across the board. We have all these amazing athletes that do amazing performances, and maybe they're a freak. And they're just super, super talented, and they're doing everything to their utmost. And that's wonderful, but don't make your athlete do it the same way because it's not necessarily the best way for them, if that all makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes me just think of knowledge and information is prolific in this day and age. YouTube, you mentioned, Google, it's at our fingertips, knowledge, but it's the implementation of the knowledge contextual to the individual, their world, their dreams, their desires. Talents, lack of talent, etc., that matters. So yeah. I think that's really interesting. Glynis, if you could boil everything you've learned across your sporting success, your coaching roles, your work in administration, down to one piece of advice to help listeners of this program pursue enjoy their own physical best performance, what would that one piece of advice be?
Look, one is enjoy what you do. And in addition to that is just challenge yourself. Don't be happy to wake up in the morning and just go through and do. And I think that was one thing that I sort of lost myself, and I went into a depression at one stage because I was doing everything for everyone else and I forgot to do it for me. Make sure you enjoy it, do it for you, and do it as a challenge. So, step by step, make the challenges harder and harder and achievable, but make sure that you're doing it for you for all the right reasons.
And on the word challenge, every guest of the show issues listeners with a physical challenge for the week. So what is Glynis Nunn, Olympic champion, OAM, Order of Australia medal? What's your challenge to listeners going to be for the week?
As a kid, when I first started training, we used to do something called half-hour conditioning. And it's where you do 10 minutes of walk 50, run 50, then 10 minutes of run 100, walk 100, then 10 minutes of run 50, walk 50. Now, I'm not saying that's something that people could go out and do, but what they can do is do 10 minutes of run 50, walk 50, run 50, walk 50. See how many lengths that they can do, how many 50s they can do, and build that up. And as they build up, then they can start doing, 10 minutes of 50s, 5 minutes of 100s, then 10 minutes and 10 minutes of 100s, and then gradually build it up to a half hour. It's the best way of of getting fitness, and once you get fit, it's such a nice feeling. And I actually had a kid, one of my athletes, on Monday night at training. He trained the house down, and then I said, "How are you feeling?" He said, "I'm just starting to feel good." And I went, "It's the best feeling when you just start to feel good, and it doesn't happen tomorrow. It happens down the track. But when you get there, you go, oh my God, such a good feeling."
So we'll call that the Glynis Nunn 30-minute challenge. And, you sit here before me today, still a picture of physical ability and fitness. How do you stay in shape these days? Glynis, what do you like to do?
Yeah, it's a mixture. It's when I get time. And I talked about the me time before, and I have to try and find me time, because between work and I live on a farm, so it's the farm work and feeding the horses, and then I coach, and then, you go home and you've got responsibilities of cooking and whatever. So for me to stay fit, I have to try and find a me time every second day. So I go for a run, I do something on the farm, just something active. I've got a little weights area at home where I can do some weights or ride a bike or do something. So it's just finding the me time.
And I think that's a beautiful example of when exercise and physical activity is a habit early in life. Even if you have to find every second day opportunities, as responsibilities accrue through life, it's still part of your world. It's not something that's foreign to you.
I think someone said, you can take the person out of the sport, but you can't take the sport out of the person. That's so true. And I've been lucky enough. My kids are both active. My daughter rides horses, she show jumps, and Blake's in America playing soccer. So, whilst they haven't followed in my footsteps, which I would have hated, they've become involved, and they've got responsibilities, and they're keen to get fit and do stuff.
And Glynis, we sit here today at inside the Gold Coast Academy of Sport and the Sporting Hall of Fame. I'm surrounded by amazing memorabilia in this room. Can you paint a little bit of a picture in terms of the work you do here as the Executive Director of the Gold Coast Academy of Sport? It's an outworking of your passion for the development, of kids.
Yeah, so, the Academy, we're funded by the Gold Coast City Council, and we've got some other sponsors, which are amazing. Without their help, we wouldn't be able to run the program. So we run a number of sporting programs where we don't only do skill activities, but we do life skills. So, we teach them the right way to eat. We teach them how to recover, how to prevent injury, so self-massage, make sure you do the recovery right. If you do get an injury, then what do you do? We talk about psychology, so how to approach, mental toughness, how to approach decision-making, how to approach any issues that you have in sport, disappointment, those sorts of things. Even to the point of depression, and social media. The issues now that we've got on social media is immense, because I look back when we were going through sport, you didn't have to worry about what you were doing. Not that I didn't do that, but there's a camera, or there's someone with a photo or a phone somewhere that can video you, and that's not a pressure. It's about someone saying something nasty on Facebook and you reading it and go, really? And it becomes a self-worth thing. And you have to make sure that you can continue to believe in yourself and what you're doing. So we teach that. We talk about cyber safety, time management, with kids, and sport and school and assignments and all the pressures on life. We try and talk to them about how they can deal with those sorts of things. So it's all about life lessons. And I think, if we can teach the kids how to become nicer people, better people in themselves, as well as improve and reach their potential, then we've done our job. And for me, that's really, really important. And if we can, continue to do that here on the coast, at least we're helping kids in a number of different sports to stay in touch with sport and make it, a part of their life, because sport teaches us so much in life. And it's really, really important, even down to the point of, am I making the right decision, just to learn how to do those sorts of things.
What do you think's the greatest lesson you've learnt through sport, Glynis?
When you start something, don't give up. When I was, my parents gave me a mug that said, things along the line. It was a Snoopy mug that said, never tell me that I can't do something, because that was the worst thing you could say to me. Oh, you can't do that. Really? I can't do it? I'll show you that I can't do it. And I turn around and do it. So, I always had to be first to the fridge, first up the steps, whatever. That was just inbuilt.
When you start something, don't give up. What powerful words.
Absolutely.
Glynis, finally, what would you say are the 3 most important characteristics, not just for junior athletes, but anyone out there, the middle-aged recreational athlete, the busy executive trying to stay fit? What do you think are the top 3 characteristics for physical health and performance?
Oh, God. Characteristics. Dedication. So dedication, commitment, I think, is the same. So then characteristics. Love. And I've said that before, you've got to love what you do. And own what you do. So I think they're 3 really things. And I think one, love, dedicate it and own it. It sort of follows through. So, there's so many other things, but I think those 3 things. And I think apart from all that, know you're not an island. There are so many people out there that you can network with, that you're not an island, and, it's get as many people as you can into your little network and talk and share and be with other people. Don't be by yourself.
Glynis Nunn, wow. Thank you for your time today and for featuring as really a legend of sport and so much more. Your contribution is so much greater than the Olympic gold, and so thank you for your time today.
Pleasure. Thank you.
So there you have it, another episode of the Physical Performance Show, and I trust you enjoyed Glynis Nunn's very rich and insightful sharings. And if you did, and you know someone in your world who would benefit from this, particularly someone that's got children involved in sport, then please take the time to share the episode with them. And do jump over and take a look at all the wonderful work that the Gold Coast Academy of Sport is doing. You'll find it readily over at goldcoastacademyofsport.com.au. If you're yet to hit subscribe to the show and you've been enjoying the episodes, then please consider doing so. It really is the best way for the show to grow, and it also ensures that each week you will receive the fresh episode as it goes live into your earbuds. A big thanks to those who have been leaving ratings and reviews over on iTunes. That is wonderfully appreciated. It really is great feedback on how the show is impacting you. And a massive thanks this week to Planted Life, who rated the show 5 stars and commented, having found this podcast during a rehab phase, I have not only learnt more about the human body, but also learnt so much about the human mind. Through the art of conversation, I feel more connected and aware of both the elite and recreational athletes' successes and struggles. My daily listen, which fills me with motivation and knowledge. Thank you. I'm a better athlete for it. Planted Life, thank you. Your review really does speak to the very heartbeat of this show. That's wonderfully encouraging, so thank you. And if you would like to leave a review over on iTunes, then you can do so from any device, including your phone. A big thanks to the 3 very good folk who make the show possible each and every week. Daryl Misson, our audio engineer, Susan Wilkin on all things show administration, and Matthew Walding on all things show graphic design. Another huge thank you to this week's show sponsor, the Gold Coast Marathon. Podcasts are free to download, however, they are not free to produce, so Gold Coast Marathon support is enormously appreciated. And if you are looking for a great mid-year challenge held on the beautiful Gold Coast in Australia, then look no further than the Gold Coast Marathon. There's an event for everyone, ranging from the junior dashes right through to the full feature-length marathon. Now, coming up on next week's episode of the Physical Performance Show, we pop the expert edition hat back on, and I'll share with you a conversation that I had with Gold Coast-based physiotherapist, PhD scholar, the Kettlebell Physio. That's right, it's a deep dive into all things strength and conditioning using those funny-looking and oftentimes intimidating things known as kettlebells. You'll learn all about the origins of the kettlebell, their uses, and the emerging research that make these a wonderful tool to incorporate into your strength and conditioning work. So be sure to be tuning in next week for a fun look at all things kettlebells with Neil May. Until then, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.